The pulse oximeter clipped onto Jamal Rhodes's finger before Sergeant Paul Danner asked Dana Whitaker to move again. The EMT held Jamal's hand, still beside the rear wheel of a Port Alder patrol cruiser. He watched the small screen settle. Jamal sat on the pavement with one knee raised. His gray t-shirt had pulled tight across his shoulders. Each breath lifted his shoulders farther than the last. A gray property pouch rested on the hood of Eric Barlow's cruiser, less than 15 feet away. Dana had already pointed to it once. His inhaler is in that bag. Barlow looked toward the pouch. Danner looked at Dana. Her Harbor Ridge Medical Center badge hung outside her olive field jacket. The badge showed her photo, name, and the words, Senior Trauma Nurse. Danner had looked at the badge when she first approached. He looked at it again now. Stay behind the door, ma'am. Dana remained beside the open rear door of the second cruiser. Jamal bent farther over his raised knee. The EMT glanced down at the oximeter. He waited several seconds and checked the reading again. Dana could not see the exact number from where Danner had placed her. She could see the EMT's hand move to Jamal's wrist. She saw Jamal try to answer, then trail off after 2 words. Dana pointed to the pouch again. That medication needs to come out. Danner turned his head toward Barlow. Check it. Barlow walked to the hood. The pouch had been closed with a plastic property tie. It had not yet been sealed with an evidence label. A wallet, a phone, and a small blue inhaler were visible through the clear panel on one side. Barlow lifted the inhaler. Name matches. Jamal raised one hand from his knee. That's mine. His voice barely carried past the cruiser. Dana stayed where she had been told. Give it to the EMT. Danner looked back at her. I need you to let them handle this. Dana stopped speaking. Barlow handed the inhaler to the EMT. The EMT read the label and asked Jamal a short question. Then he fitted the inhaler into Jamal's hand. Dana watched Jamal miss the first attempt. His fingers were shaking. The EMT steadied the device. Slow down. Jamal took the medication. Nothing changed immediately. The EMT kept the oximeter in place. Dana looked at Jamal's neck. The muscles above his collarbone still pulled with every breath. She did not move toward him. The olive jacket stayed zipped halfway over her scrubs. A faded patch on the shoulder read Harbor 7 in small block letters. Barlow noticed the patch. He looked at it for a moment, then returned his attention to Jamal. Danner did not ask about it yet. The EMT checked the monitor again. He's in respiratory distress. Dana looked at Danner. She had used the same words less than a minute earlier. Danner nodded to the EMT. What do you need? Space. Oxygen setup. Danner moved immediately. He waved Barlow back from Jamal and cleared the area beside the cruiser. Dana remained behind the patrol door. An equipment bag came off the ambulance stretcher. The EMT opened it on the pavement. A second medic attached tubing and placed a mask within reach. Jamal's breathing remained uneven, but he was no longer trying to speak. Dana rested one hand against the top edge of the open cruiser door. She did not offer another instruction. A police radio inside Barlow's unit crackled. The dispatcher repeated a unit number, then gave an update. The person being sought was now described as wearing a red baseball cap and a dark jacket. A dark sedan was associated with the call. Barlow turned toward Jamal. Jamal wore no cap. His shirt was gray. His compact crossover sat 20 yards behind the cruisers, with its hazard lights blinking. Barlow reached for the radio microphone. Copy the update. Danner looked at him. Barlow lowered the microphone but kept it in his hand. The dispatcher repeated the vehicle information. Dark sedan. Dana looked past the cruiser toward Jamal's crossover. Its rear hatch was dusty. A child's school parking sticker sat in the lower corner of the back window. No one said anything about it. The EMT checked Jamal's pulse again. His shoulders were moving less. He managed a full sentence. I can breathe a little better. The EMT nodded. We're still taking you in. Jamal looked toward Dana. She gave him one short nod. Go with them. Danner stepped between Dana and the stretcher path before the EMTs lifted Jamal. Dana did not try to pass him. The ambulance crew moved Jamal onto the stretcher. Barlow picked up the gray property pouch from the hood and carried it beside them. The phone and wallet were still inside. The inhaler remained with Jamal. Dana watched the ambulance doors stay open, while one medic secured the oxygen line. She looked toward Danner. Does he still match what dispatch sent? Danner kept his attention on the ambulance. The description is still developing. Dana waited. Barlow had heard the same update. The EMTs had already confirmed the medical problem. Jamal had already received the medication Dana identified. The sedan description had already replaced the earlier vehicle information. Danner had not released the detention. He had not told Barlow to end it. He had not told Dana she could leave either. The ambulance doors closed. Dana stepped away from the cruiser door. Danner raised one hand. "Stay where you are for now." Dana stopped. The ambulance pulled forward. Its lights reflected across the windows of the nearby businesses as it entered traffic. Dana watched it clear the intersection. Then she looked back at Danner. Jamal was gone. The property pouch was gone with Barlow. The medical emergency had been confirmed. The suspect description had changed. The scene was smaller now. Danner still had not released anyone. Paul Danner watched the ambulance clear the intersection before he turned back to Dana Whitaker. She was still beside the cruiser. The rear door had been closed. Eric Barlow returned from the ambulance lane, carrying the gray property pouch. Jamal Rhodes's wallet and phone were still inside. Barlow placed the pouch on the front passenger seat of his cruiser. Danner took a small notebook from his shirt pocket. "Who asked you to enter the scene?" "No one." Dana kept both hands at her sides. "I saw him having trouble breathing." Danner wrote something. "Were you working for the hospital at the time?" "No." "You were off duty?" "Yes." He looked at the Harbor Ridge badge clipped above her jacket zipper. The words, "Senior Trauma Nurse," were still visible. Danner had already read them. He looked down at the notebook again. "So you weren't responding through the hospital?" "No." "Then why did you step into an active detention?" Dana waited until he looked up. He was struggling to breathe. Danner wrote another line. Barlow stood beside the driver's door of his cruiser. A green light remained on near the top of his body camera. Danner noticed it. "Your camera still running?" "Yes." "Leave it on." Barlow lowered his hand. Dana looked at the camera once. She did not mention it. Danner turned a page in the notebook. "When you approached, did you know he was being detained?" "Yes." "And you still came in?" "I saw a medical problem." "Did you know EMS had been called?" "I saw the ambulance coming." Danner paused. "Then why not wait?" Dana looked toward the intersection where the ambulance had disappeared. He was already struggling. The EMT had asked her what she saw once. After that, the crew had treated Jamal. Danner had now asked the same question several different ways. He shifted his attention to Dana's jacket. The olive fabric had faded around the cuffs. The Harbor 7 patch sat high on the left sleeve. "What is that?" Dana looked down at the patch. "An old Navy medical unit call sign." "You currently in the Navy?" "No." "Reserve?" "No." Danner looked at the patch again. "Why are you wearing it?" "It's a jacket." He held the notebook still for a moment. Dana did not add anything. She did not list assignments. She did not explain where Harbor 7 had operated. She did not give him a service history. Barlow looked from the patch to Dana's hospital badge. Danner resumed writing. "Did you tell anyone here you were military?" "No." Barlow spoke from beside the cruiser. "She didn't tell me that." Danner looked at him. "I'm getting her statement." Barlow nodded once. He did not speak again. A car passed through the intersection behind them. Another turned into the pharmacy lot. The street had returned to ordinary traffic. No ambulance remained. No medical equipment remained on the pavement. Danner continued. "Did you touch police property?" "No." "You directed Officer Barlow to open the property bag." "I told him the inhaler was inside." "You told him what to do." "I identified the medication." Danner looked at Barlow. Barlow rested one hand on the cruiser roof. "I opened the bag." Danner wrote again. Dana watched his pen move across the page. "What happened after you got the inhaler?" he asked. "I stayed where you told me." "Before that?" "EMS took over." Danner shook his head once. "I'm asking about your conduct." Dana looked at him. "That was my conduct." Barlow opened the driver's door and listened. The dispatcher was speaking to another unit now. No new instruction came for their scene. Barlow closed the door. "The updated description is still the last one we have," he said. Danner kept his eyes on the notebook. It was preliminary. Barlow did not answer. Dana looked toward Jamal's crossover. Its hazard lights were still blinking. No officer was standing beside it. No one was searching it. Danner asked Dana for her home address and phone number. She gave both. He compared the spelling of her name to the hospital badge. Then he asked her to spell it. Dana did. Danner wrote the letters one at a time. He asked which department she worked in. Trauma. How long? Dana gave him the answer. He asked whether she supervised other nurses. Yes. He wrote that down too. Nothing in the question concerned Jamal's breathing. Dana looked at the notebook. Do you still need me for the medical call? Danner closed the notebook halfway. I need a complete account before you go. I've given you the medical account. I need the scene account. Dana looked toward Barlow. His body camera light remained on. She turned back to Danner. What part is missing? Danner opened the notebook fully again. Start from why you decided to enter the detention area. Dana did not move. She had answered that first. She answered it again. He was having trouble breathing. Danner placed the pen on a clean line. And what made you think it was your place to intervene? The medical crew had already transported Jamal. The medical problem had already been confirmed. Danner was still asking why Dana had recognized it. Am I free to go? Dana Whitaker stood beside the front quarter panel of Eric Barlow's cruiser. Paul Danner kept his notebook open on the hood. The ambulance, carrying Jamal Rhodes, had already cleared the intersection. The pharmacy lot had returned to normal traffic. A delivery van backed out near the far curb. Jamal's compact crossover remained where officers had stopped it, with the hazard lights still blinking. Danner looked at Dana before answering. Not yet. Dana waited several seconds. What am I being held for? I'm still determining whether your actions interfered with an active detention. The answer did not identify anything that had happened since the medical crew took over. Dana had moved when Danner told her to move. She had stayed behind the cruiser when he told her to stay there. She had answered his questions about her job, the Navy patch on her jacket, and why she had stepped toward Jamal in the first place. Barlow remained near the driver's door of his unit. The green indicator on his body camera was still on. Dana looked at Danner. Which action are you calling interference? Danner closed the notebook halfway. You entered a controlled scene, directed an officer, and continued questioning what we were doing. The EMT confirmed he was in respiratory distress. That isn't the issue now. I stayed where you told me after EMS took over. Barlow shifted his weight near the cruiser. She did. Danner turned toward him. Barlow did not step closer. After you told her to stay behind the unit, she stayed there. Danner looked at him for a moment, then lowered his notebook to the hood. The interference started before that. Barlow nodded once. He did not argue. Dana looked toward Jamal's crossover. No officer was searching it. No one was standing beside it. Both officers had already heard the updated dispatch information. It described a man in a red cap, connected to a dark sedan. Dana asked the question again, but changed nothing else. Am I detained? Danner answered this time. Yes. For what specific act? For obstruction, while we sort out the scene. Dana stopped asking questions. Danner raised his radio. Dispatch. Show one additional detained at this location. Adult female. Possible obstruction related to the active stop. The dispatcher repeated the entry back to him. Barlow opened his cruiser door and looked at the mobile terminal. A new line had appeared under the incident status. Dana could not read the screen from where she stood. Barlow could. He looked at it, then at Danner. The suspect update is still the red cap and dark sedan. We're not holding her as the suspect. I know. Barlow touched the edge of the screen with one finger. I'm separating the two things. Danner's response was quiet. Then keep them separate in your report. Barlow lowered his hand. I will. Dana heard the exchange but did not turn toward either man. Danner returned the radio to his shoulder and stepped closer. What I need now is for you to turn around. Dana turned. Hands behind your back. She placed them there. Danner removed a pair of handcuffs and secured her wrists. He checked the spacing after the second cuff closed. Dana did not pull against them or ask why the restraints were necessary. He moved her toward the rear passenger door. Her Harbor Ridge badge shifted against the front of her jacket as she walked. The badge still identified her as a senior trauma nurse. The cuffs did not change that record. Danner reopened his notebook. Before you approached Mr. Rhodes, did anyone ask you to provide medical assistance? No. Did anyone authorize you to enter the detention area? No. Did you know officers were conducting an investigation? Yes. Danner wrote after each answer. Dana watched the pen move. The questions had changed form, but they continued circling the same event. She had seen Jamal struggling to breathe. She had identified the inhaler. Barlow had opened the police-controlled pouch. EMS had confirmed respiratory distress and taken over his care. After that, Dana had followed every physical direction Danner gave her. Danner asked whether she had raised her voice. No. Whether she had touched the property bag? No. Whether she had refused to step back? No. Barlow spoke before Danner could write the next line. She didn't touch the bag. Danner kept his pen against the page. I didn't say she did. He wrote anyway. Dana looked at the notebook. Are you recording that EMS confirmed the medical issue? Danner paused. I'm documenting the entire event. Dana did not repeat the question. Barlow's body camera remained pointed toward them. The police radio had already recorded the revised suspect description. The mobile terminal had now recorded Dana as an additional detainee for possible obstruction. Those entries existed in the same incident, but they had been created in a specific order. First, the medical problem had been confirmed. Then the suspect description tied to the original stop changed. Dana had remained where she was told. After that, Danner logged obstruction. He closed the notebook. We'll finish this at the station. Dana looked at him. Am I under arrest? For now. You're being detained while the obstruction issue is documented. Danner opened the rear cruiser door. Dana stepped inside without assistance. He closed the door and moved toward the front of the vehicle. Barlow remained outside for another moment, looking at the mobile terminal through the open driver's door. The screen now held two separate facts from the same roadside encounter. The current suspect description did not match Jamal Rhodes. Dana Whitaker was listed as detained for possible obstruction. Danner had entered the second fact after hearing the first. Civilian interference during active detention appeared at the top of Paul Danner's incident screen before Dana Whitaker was released from the Port Alder Police Department. Dana could see the words from the chair across the processing room. The monitor sat on a swivel arm behind the counter, angled far enough that she could read the heading, but not the smaller narrative below it. Danner stood at the keyboard with his field notebook open beside his right hand, transferring selected lines from the roadside notes into the formal report. Eric Barlow used a second terminal several feet away. Dana had been uncuffed after entering the secure processing area, but she had not been told she could leave. Her Harbor Ridge badge remained clipped to her jacket, and her phone sat face down on the counter where an officer had placed it during intake. Danner typed for another minute. He stopped, read the screen, then added a sentence. Dana did not ask what he was writing. Barlow finished entering his own identification information and looked toward Danner's monitor. You putting me on the primary? As assisting. Barlow nodded and returned to his screen. Danner's narrative began with the original detention scene. It described Dana as a civilian who entered the active police area, questioned officer actions, and attempted to direct access to property being held during the stop. The wording was not entirely invented. Dana had entered the area. She had asked questions. She had identified Jamal's inhaler inside the gray pouch. The first paragraph didn't mention that an ambulance crew later confirmed respiratory distress. It also didn't say that Barlow had opened the pouch himself, or that Dana stayed where Danner had placed her after EMS took over. Those facts still existed. They simply did not appear near the classification. Barlow leaned toward his terminal and began typing a supplemental note. Danner glanced over. What are you adding? My observations. I've got the scene summary. I know. Barlow continued typing. Dana watched the movement of his hands without trying to read the screen. His note was shorter than Danner's. He recorded that Dana identified herself as a nurse, alerted officers to breathing difficulty, and remained behind the cruiser after being instructed to do so. He also noted that EMS assumed care and transported Jamal. Then he added one more line. Dispatch had issued an updated suspect description during the encounter. Danner stopped typing. You need the full description in your supplement? I'm noting the update came in. It wasn't the reason she was detained. Barlow looked at him. I'm not saying it was. Danner held his hand above the keyboard for a moment before turning back to his own report. Dana said nothing. The distinction made at the roadside had followed them inside. One record described why Danner said he continued the encounter. Another preserved facts that limited how broadly that explanation could later be read. Neither record erased the other. Danner completed the classification field. He selected Pending Supervisory Review from the disposition menu. He printed a single-page incident receipt. The printer fed the paper out slowly. The bottom edge curled upward. Danner signed beside the report number. He brought it across the room. "You're being released, pending review." Dana took the sheet. "Is obstruction still the listed classification?" "For now." She looked at the paper. The receipt contained the incident number, date, agency, name, classification, and a line stating that no charging decision had been entered at release. Dana read that line twice. "What is the disposition?" "Pending review." She nodded once. "Who has the incident number after tonight?" "It stays in the department system." Dana folded the receipt once and placed it in her jacket pocket. She did not ask Danner to rewrite the report in front of her. She did not repeat what EMS had confirmed. She did not explain her work history again. Barlow finished his supplemental entry and selected Save. A confirmation box appeared. He read it, clicked Submit, and moved his hand away from the mouse. Danner looked toward his terminal. "You done?" "Yes." "Anything inconsistent with the primary?" Barlow turned his chair slightly. "I documented what I observed." Danner did not ask him to remove anything. He returned to Dana's report and clicked through the final submission screen. The classification remained unchanged. Dana picked up her phone from the counter. The lock screen showed several missed notifications from Harbor Ridge Medical Center, but she did not open them there. Danner placed his notebook into a drawer beneath the workstation. "You can go." Dana walked through the secured door and into the public lobby. No officer followed her. She had regained the right to leave the building. The incident stayed in the department system. Inside the department system, civilian interference during active detention remained the first line a later reader would see. Barlow's note was there too. They had to open it. Dana Whitaker's name was still on the Harbor Ridge staffing board when she entered the trauma unit, but it was no longer beside the charge assignment. A yellow status bar had replaced it. Administrative review hold. Her badge opened the employee entrance downstairs without a problem. The same badge cleared the secure elevator to the trauma floor. Nothing about her professional credential had expired overnight. The staffing assignment had changed anyway. Dana removed her coat and folded it over one arm. The Harbor 7 patch faced inward against the fabric. Her phone had shown 3 missed calls from nursing operations after she left the police station. She had returned one from the parking garage and been told to report to Elaine Porter before taking a patient assignment. Elaine's office sat behind the staffing desk, separated from the unit by a glass wall. Dana entered with the incident receipt still folded in her jacket pocket. Elaine closed the door but left the blinds open. "I need to explain the status before you clock into the unit." Dana remained standing until Elaine pointed to the chair across from her desk. A printed staffing sheet lay beside Elaine's keyboard. Dana's name had been crossed out next to charge trauma and moved to a blank section at the bottom. "Police contacted employment verification overnight," Elaine said. "The inquiry was tied to an incident involving your hospital identification." Dana took the receipt from her pocket. "Did they say I was charged?" Elaine looked at the paper but did not take it yet. "They described an active review involving interference with a detention." "That wasn't my question." Elaine paused, then held out her hand. Dana passed her the receipt. Elaine read the agency name, incident number, and classification. Her finger stopped on the disposition line. "No charging decision entered at release." She read the line again. "So, no," Dana said. "I wasn't charged." Elaine placed the receipt beside the staffing sheet. "This isn't a disciplinary action." "What is it?" "We're placing a temporary assignment restriction until Employee Relations reviews the outside incident." Dana looked through the glass wall toward the trauma desk. Another nurse was reading the morning assignment board. She reached Dana's usual charge line. She paused, then kept scanning down the board. "What records did Employee Relations review?" Elaine moved one hand to the mouse. "We have the police incident classification and the verification call." "Anything else?" "Not yet." "No body camera?" "No." "It's SOMRED." "No EMS documentation?" "Not that I've seen." "No supplemental officer report?" Elaine looked at the incident receipt again. "I don't know what supplements exist." Dana nodded once. That answer established the limit. Elaine opened the staffing system and turned the monitor slightly so Dana could see the status without seeing other employee information. The screen showed her name and current unit. It showed her credential status and a yellow flag. Her nursing license field remained active. Her hospital credential remained active. Required training showed current. No patient care restriction appeared from licensing or credentialing. Only the assignment field had changed. "What exactly can I do today?" Dana asked. "Education modules? Documentation review? Non-clinical administrative work. No charge assignment and no direct trauma assignment until the review is cleared." "For how long?" "I don't have an end time." Elaine used the same tone she reserved for staffing shortages and schedule changes. "It may be brief." Dana looked at the yellow bar. The system did not say brief. It said administrative review hold. Elaine picked up the receipt again. "I'll scan this into the employee review file. Include the disposition line." "I will. And note that I asked what source the restriction is based on." Elaine looked at her. "I can document that." Dana did not ask Elaine to decide whether the police report was accurate. Elaine had not been at the roadside scene and had not seen the body camera. Dana asked for something narrower. "Please document that no supporting video or EMS record had been reviewed when this status was entered." Elaine rested her hand beside the keyboard. After a few seconds, she typed. Dana could see the entry appear in the notes field. Employee provided incident receipt, showing no charging decision at release. Supporting video and EMS records not available to nursing operations at time of temporary assignment restriction. Elaine clicked Save. A timestamp appeared beside the note. That record did not restore Dana's assignment. It did something else. It fixed what Harbor Ridge knew when it acted. Elaine printed a one-page acknowledgement of the temporary restriction and slid it across the desk. Dana read the page before signing receipt of it. The form did not say she agreed with the basis. She signed only the line confirming she had received the notice. Elaine collected the hospital copy. "You can use the education room on the 4th floor. I'll contact you when employee relations gives us the next step." Dana stood. Through the glass wall, a trauma call came over the unit speaker. The nurse, who had been moved into Dana's charge position, picked up the assignment clipboard and headed toward the clinical area. Dana did not follow. She folded the temporary restriction notice and placed it behind the police incident receipt. The two documents now sat together in the same pocket. One record said police review was pending. Harbor Ridge had already acted on it. Elaine returned to the staffing screen and selected the final confirmation box. Dana's name disappeared from the active trauma assignment list. Her license was still current. Her badge still worked. Her shift had already been reassigned. Gordon Ellis stopped scrolling when Dana Whitaker's name failed to appear in the access list. He sat at a small workstation inside Harbor Ridge Compliance, with Dana on the other side of the desk and Elaine Porter standing near the file cabinet. The screen showed Jamal Rhodes's emergency record, but Gordon was not reading the medical chart itself. He had opened the audit history. It tracked which employee credentials had viewed it. Dana's name was not there. Gordon adjusted the date range and ran the query again. He extended it from before the roadside encounter through the start of the current shift. The result stayed the same. "No access under your account," he said. Dana looked at the screen. "Before or after EMS brought him in?" "Neither." Gordon printed the audit summary and initialed the bottom margin. The page listed system times, employee identifiers, and access events associated with Jamal's record. But Dana's hospital credential did not appear among them. Elaine read the first page. "That closes the chart access question." Dana waited. "Does it close the hold?" Elaine placed the audit beside the temporary restriction notice from earlier. "Not while the outside incident is still pending review." The answer was ordinary enough to fit on any employee relations call. One question had been resolved, but the system status remained because another department had not finished its own process. Dana's badge still opened hospital doors. Her license was still active. Gordon's audit now showed she had not used hospital access to obtain information about Jamal before stepping into the roadside scene. None of that returned her to the trauma floor. Elaine changed the assignment note from charge restriction to non-clinical assignment pending outside review and saved it. That removed the remaining clinical option for the shift. Dana read the status before Elaine closed the window. "Please attach the audit result to the same review file." "I will." Dana did not ask Gordon to characterize what had happened on the roadside. He had not been there. She took the printed acknowledgement for her non-clinical assignment and went back toward the education room. Her coat was folded over her arm. When she adjusted it near the elevator, the old Harbor 7 patch faced outward for several seconds. She folded the fabric over it again. Across town, Eric Barlow saw the same patch on a paused body camera frame. He had been reviewing his recording at Paul Danner's request before completing an additional statement. Dana stood behind the patrol unit in the image, exactly where Danner had placed her after EMS took control of Jamal's care. Barlow moved the video back several seconds. The patch became clearer. Harbor 7. He knew the name. It had belonged to a Navy Medical Response Unit. Danner stood at the adjacent desk with a supplemental statement open on his monitor. "You recognize that?" Barlow kept his eyes on the paused frame. "Yes." "What is it?" "Old Navy Medical Unit." Danner looked toward the screen. "So she had military medical experience too. That's what the patch suggests." Danner returned to his statement. Barlow let the recording continue. Dana's voice came through the body camera microphone. She identified herself as a trauma nurse. She pointed out Jamal's breathing problem. She identified where the inhaler was located. She did not mention the Navy. She did not identify a rank. She did not claim authority over either officer. Barlow stopped the video again. "She never used it." Danner looked over. "Used what?" "The Navy affiliation. She never brought it up. I'm documenting the whole context." Barlow walked to Danner's desk. The supplemental statement had already been drafted. Near the middle was a sentence describing Dana's conduct as contributing to escalating scene control concerns, followed by a reference to her medical credentials and apparent military medical affiliation. Below the narrative were two signature lines. Danner's name was already entered under the first. Barlow's appeared beneath the second. "I didn't describe it that way," Barlow said. "It's a joint supplemental. We were both there. I was there. That doesn't make every sentence mine." Danner leaned back in his chair. "You disagree that she kept inserting herself into the scene?" "I'm saying she identified a medical problem. EMS confirmed it. And after you moved her behind the unit, she stayed there. That's already in your supplement. Then my supplement can stand." Danner read his own paragraph again. His cursor remained beside the phrase, "scene control concerns." He did not delete it. Instead, he removed Barlow's name from the statement header. He changed the document type from Joint Supplemental to Primary Officer Supplemental. Barlow watched him make the change. That allowed Danner to keep the wording. It also changed who owned it. Danner printed a copy for the incident folder. He left the second signature line on the draft page unused. Barlow returned to his workstation and added one sentence to his own existing supplement. At no time, observed, did Whitaker identify herself as military or claim military authority during the encounter. He saved the entry. No argument followed. Dana remained off the trauma floor. The obstruction classification remained open. Danner's supplemental statement remained part of the case, but the line intended for the second officer's signature stayed blank. Dana Whitaker laid the police report beside the Harbor Ridge review notice and lined up the printed timestamps along the edge of the training room table. The documents had arrived through different systems. The hospital notice came from employee relations. The police packet came from a records request tied to the incident number Dana had been given when she left the station. It contained the primary report, Eric Barlow's supplement, Paul Danner's later supplemental statement, and a media inventory page. The video itself was not included. Dana started with the dates and creation times. She did not read the conclusions first. The Harbor Ridge note, documenting the temporary assignment restriction, had been saved before Danner created his supplemental statement describing escalating scene control concerns. It had also been saved before the signed 7 sentence referring to Dana's apparent military medical affiliation existed in the police file. That order was clear from the metadata printed at the bottom of each page. Elaine Porter entered the training room, carrying a folder and a paper cup. "I got the same packet." Dana slid the hospital notice toward her. "Which police version did employee relations have when this hold was entered?" Elaine put down the cup and opened the folder. She checked the document log attached to the employee review file, then compared it with the records packet, the original incident classification, and the employment verification contact. "Not this supplement?" Elaine looked at Danner's later statement. "No. That came after." Dana nodded. She did not ask Elaine what the sequence meant. The sequence already had a measurable form. Harbor Ridge had restricted Dana's assignment based on an active police classification. Later, Danner added broader language about scene control and military medical affiliation Whatever those later statements might eventually be worth, they had not been part of the information Harbor Ridge used when it first changed Dana's work status. Elaine read Barlow's supplement next. His account remained narrower. Dana had identified a breathing problem. EMS had taken over Jamal's care. Dana had remained behind the patrol unit after being directed there. Dispatch had issued an updated suspect description during the encounter. Barlow's later clarification added that Dana had not identified military status or claimed military authority. Elaine placed the page beside Danner's supplemental. Those aren't written the same way. No. Dana left it at that. The difference was not a disagreement about whether Dana had been present. Both reports established that. It was not a disagreement about whether she had spoken to the officers. Both established that too. The difference was in how the later wording framed those actions. Danner described a growing scene control problem. Barlow documented a medical intervention followed by compliance with a location command. Dana turned to the media inventory page. One body camera file was listed under Barlow's employee number. The system showed the file had been uploaded, associated with the incident, and retained under the case number. The page also listed the recording's start and stop information. Elaine leaned closer. So the video exists. The inventory says it does. Did records give you access? No. The release note stated that associated video was not part of the written record packet. It remained subject to the department's separate review process. Elaine sat across from Dana. Employee relations is going to leave the hold in place until the police review closes. Dana looked at the documents between them. Even though the later explanation wasn't in the file when the hold started, Elaine turned the police supplement over once, then put it back. They're treating the open incident as the controlling condition. That answer changed nothing on the staffing system. Dana remained assigned to non-clinical work. Her nursing credential was current. Gordon Ellis's audit still showed no access to Jamal's chart. The police receipt still showed no charging decision at release. The hold remained because the police incident remained open. Dana gathered the pages into separate stacks instead of combining them. Hospital record, primary police report, Barlow supplement, Danner supplemental, media inventory. Elaine watched her arrange them. What are you doing? Keeping the versions separate. Dana pointed to the creation information at the bottom of Danner's supplemental. If someone reviews this later, I don't want the last explanation read as if it was the first one. Elaine opened the employee review file on her laptop. I can preserve the packet as received. Please do. Elaine uploaded the written police records without replacing the earlier documents. The employee system generated a new attachment entry and retained the original restriction note beneath it. Dana watched the screen until the confirmation appeared. The older file had not been overwritten. The newer explanation sat after it. That mattered because the sequence could no longer depend on anyone remembering which version came first. Elaine opened the staffing panel after saving the records. The same status remained beside Dana's name. Non-clinical assignment outside review pending. No new clinical work appeared. Dana folded her copies and returned them to the document envelope. She had gained no shift back. No police classification had been removed. No supervisor had made a final finding. But one question had become smaller. The military affiliation in Danner's supplemental could not have been the reason Harbor Ridge first restricted Dana. Harbor Ridge had already done that before the sentence existed. Dana picked up the media inventory page last. At the bottom was the retained body camera file reference. The written reports had begun to pull away from one another. The recording had not been opened in the employee review yet. The body camera file appeared on Elaine Porter's monitor, with a review watermark across the lower corner. Harbor Ridge had received a restricted viewing copy rather than the original evidence file. The police department still controlled the incident record, but employee relations had been allowed to review footage that directly involved Dana Whitaker before deciding whether her work restriction should continue. Dana sat beside the small conference table instead of at Elaine's desk. Her next scheduled trauma assignment had already been changed to non-clinical work. The staffing system showed the change before the video started. Elaine opened the playback log first and entered the case reference, the date of review, and the names of the people in the room. Dana asked her to keep that log with the original restriction notice and the later police records. Elaine nodded and started the footage. The first several minutes showed what the paper records already said. Jamal Rhodes was near the vehicle. Paul Danner controlled the roadside scene. Eric Barlow moved between the patrol car and the gray property pouch. Dana entered the camera frame from the edge of the shoulder and stopped several feet from Jamal. Her hands remained visible. She spoke toward the officers, then pointed toward Jamal and the pouch. Elaine lowered the volume slightly. On the recording, Dana identified the breathing problem and told them the inhaler was inside the gray pouch. She did not reach for it. Barlow opened the pouch himself. His body camera tilted down as his hand moved through the contents. The inhaler came into view in his hand before Dana moved any closer. On paper, the difference looked minor. Danner's primary narrative described Dana as directing officers toward property being controlled during an active detention. That wording didn't come from nowhere. Dana had told them where the inhaler was. The video showed what the written account left out. Police kept physical custody of the pouch for the whole exchange. Dana never touched it. EMS arrived later in the recording and took over Jamal's medical care. Dana gave a short explanation, stepped away, and remained behind the patrol unit after Danner directed her there. Elaine stopped the video. She stays there. Yes. Dana did not add anything else. Elaine restarted the file. The radio traffic became clearer once Barlow stood near the driver's side of the cruiser. A dispatcher gave an updated description connected to the call that had brought the officers into the area. Dana was visible in the same frame. The revised description did not match her. Barlow's camera continued recording. Danner spoke with him near the front of the patrol car. Their words were partially covered by traffic noise, but the updated description had already come through the radio before Dana was later placed under detention. Elaine moved the playback bar backward. She listened again. Dana watched the timestamp. She did not ask Elaine to interpret it. The sequence was enough for the review record. Updated description. Medical intervention. EMS takeover. Location command. Compliance. Detention. The employee file had never contained that sequence in one place. It had contained a police classification. That classification had reached Harbor Ridge first. Elaine continued until the section involving Dana's coat. The Harbor 7 patch appeared briefly when the fabric shifted. No one discussed it during the roadside encounter. There was no military title, no military rank, no statement that Dana expected different treatment because of prior service. Elaine let the footage continue until Dana was taken from the roadside scene. Then she closed the player. The review log automatically recorded the stop time. Dana looked at the staffing notice beside Elaine's keyboard. Does this change the restriction? Elaine opened the employee status panel. The external incident is still open. Dana waited. Elaine scrolled through the review note. I can document what the video shows. I can also document that it does not show you taking the property pouch or leaving the location after you were directed behind the vehicle. But the assignment stays? For now, yes. Elaine did not call the footage irrelevant. She did not say the original account had been confirmed. The policy field controlling Dana's assignment did not ask either question. It asked whether the outside incident remained unresolved. The answer was still yes. Elaine entered a new review note stating that body camera footage had been examined and that specific factual points differed in scope from the initial summary received by Harbor Ridge. She did not remove the earlier note. She attached the playback log beneath it. Dana read the entry before Elaine saved it. One line caught her attention. Employee remained at directed location after EMS assumed patient care. Dana pointed to it once. Keep the video timestamp with that sentence. Elaine added the reference. Then she saved the note. The employee system refreshed. Dana's status remained unchanged. Non-clinical assignment, outside review pending. Her next trauma shift stayed reassigned. The facts in the file had changed. The field controlling her work had not. Dana returned the review packet to Elaine and picked up her coat. She folded it, so the Old Navy patch remained inside. Before leaving, she looked once at the still frame Elaine had saved for the review record. Barlow's hand was holding the gray pouch open. Dana was several feet away. For days, the pouch had been a recurring detail in descriptions of her interference. On the recording, it had never been in her hands. The classification stays open. Lieutenant Craig Hensley's voice came through the speakerphone on Elaine Porter's conference table. Dana Whitaker sat across from Elaine with the Harbor Ridge review file closed in front of her. The body camera playback log was already inside it, along with Gordon Ellis's chart access audit and the written police records received earlier in the week. Hensley was conducting the department's supervisory intake review before sending the matter to professional standards. Elaine had requested the call because Dana's employment restriction was still tied to the active police incident. "Does that mean a charge has been approved?" Dana asked. "No," Hensley answered without hesitation. The incident remained administrative at that stage. No charging decision had been entered, and the department had not asked Harbor Ridge to discipline Dana. Elaine rested one hand beside her keyboard. "Our employment status is currently responding to your open classification. I need to know whether your review changed the underlying facts." Hensley paused before answering. "Some details require additional review." Dana looked at the closed folder. That was different from saying the original account had been confirmed. Elaine asked Hensley which materials he had reviewed. He listed Barlow's body camera recording, Barlow's supplemental statement, Danner's primary report, and later supplemental statement. He also confirmed that he had reviewed the updated dispatch description referenced in Barlow's supplement. Dana opened the folder. Her copy of the body cam review note contained the same sequence Harbor Ridge had already documented. EMS assumed care, and Dana remained at the location Danner had assigned her, while the gray property pouch stayed under police control. She did not read any of it aloud. Instead, she asked one question: what fact currently requires the interference classification to stay unchanged? Hensley did not answer immediately. Paper shifted next to his phone. "The incident is being forwarded for further review," he said. "We generally do not change the classification while that review is pending." Dana looked at Elaine. Elaine typed the sentence into the employee review note. The answer only described where the process stood. It did not point to any new action by Dana. Hensley continued. "The body camera footage does clarify portions of the encounter. Officer Barlow's supplement also contains information that is more specific than the initial summary." "And the classification remains the same?" Elaine asked. "For now." Dana did not ask Hensley whether he agreed with Danner. The supervisory review record would answer a narrower and more useful question: what Hensley had examined before choosing not to change the status. Elaine asked whether the police department was directing Harbor Ridge to keep Dana away from clinical work. "No," Hensley said. "Employment decisions are yours." That statement went into the note too. The police department would keep the classification active. Harbor Ridge would decide what that active classification meant for Dana's job. Each institution could now describe the final restriction as someone else's decision. Elaine opened Dana's staffing profile while the call continued. The current restriction still carried no expiration date. Her next trauma assignment had already been replaced with education support work. 2 later shifts had not yet been reassigned, but Elaine could not release them while the employee review trigger remained active. "Is there an expected completion date for professional standards?" she asked. Hensley said there was not one yet. Elaine entered that as well. After the call ended, she received the supervisory review document through the department's records portal. The first page carried Hensley's electronic approval. Below it was a section labeled Materials Reviewed, Body Camera Recording, Primary Incident Report, Barlow Supplemental Statement, Danner Supplemental Statement, Dispatch Update. Each item had a completed review indicator beside it. Dana read the section once. The next field contained the decision. Classification unchanged. Forward for professional standards review. No new factual allegation followed the sentence. Elaine attached the document to Dana's employee file without replacing the earlier materials. The system kept the older restriction note. It kept the bodycam playback log. It kept the chart access audit. It kept the 2 police accounts. Now it recorded that a supervisor had reviewed those materials before the original classification was preserved. Elaine returned to the employment status screen. "I can't clear the hold with this." Dana looked at the professional standards referral line. "Then don't call it cleared." Elaine nodded once. She changed nothing in the status field. The hold remained marked temporary. It still had no end date. Dana's next clinical assignment disappeared from the active staffing queue before Elaine closed the screen. The shift itself remained on Dana's schedule, but the direct care role was removed. Dana folded her copy of Hensley's review and placed it behind the bodycam log. No one had reversed the police classification. No one had restored her clinical assignment. But another explanation had become unavailable. The department could no longer say the status remained unchanged because supervisory review had not reached the Bodycam or the separate officer account. Hensley's own form showed that it had. Dana left the conference room with the same hospital badge she had carried all week. It still opened the employee corridor and the education floor. It did not return her to trauma care. Behind her, Elaine saved the final attachment. The last line on the police form remained visible on the screen. Classification unchanged. Forward for professional standards review. The professional standards worksheet listed 5 events before it listed a conclusion. Dana Whitaker sat on the public side of a narrow interview table while an analyst worked from a department laptop. A printed copy of the incident report rested beside the keyboard, but the screen showed something Dana had not seen before. It showed the report history. The department system had preserved the original save and later additions. Author and supervisory review entries remained. Each version remained available, even after newer language became the version most people opened first. The analyst started with dispatch. The original call had described a man connected to the roadside incident. The later radio update narrowed that description before Dana was detained. The Bodycam provided the next sequence. EMS assumed Jamal Rhodes's care. Dana remained where Paul Danner directed her. Eric Barlow retained physical control of the property pouch. The updated description came through the radio. Dana stayed behind the patrol vehicle. Her detention came afterward. The analyst entered each event on a separate line. Dana watched him type. When he reached the line describing EMS arrival, she moved one finger toward the worksheet. They had assumed care before I was told to stay behind the unit. The analyst checked the Bodycam index and moved the EMS handoff one line higher. Dana said nothing else. He continued. The report history showed that Danner's first narrative was not completed at the roadside. It had been entered later, after the officers returned to routine service. That alone was not unusual. Officers often finished reports after a scene ended. The sequence mattered. The first saved narrative already included facts the earlier roadside uncertainty did not account for. The updated description had been broadcast. EMS had taken over Jamal's care. Dana had complied with the location instruction. Barlow had remained in control of the pouch. Danner's report still classified the event as civilian interference during active detention. The analyst opened Barlow's supplemental statement. Barlow described Dana, identifying a medical need and giving the inhaler location. He said she stayed in the area Danner selected for her. His statement did not describe Dana taking evidence, reaching into the pouch, or attempting to leave after being told to stay. His signature appeared beneath that account. The next document had begun differently. An earlier draft of Danner's supplemental had contained space for a second officer acknowledgement. The second signature field remained blank. A later saved version identified Danner as the sole reporting officer for the supplemental narrative. Dana had seen the blank field before. Until now, it had mainly shown that Barlow had not joined Danner's expanded wording. The audit history added something else. It showed when the document changed. Barlow's separate supplement was already in the incident file. That was before Danner's later version used the phrase, escalating scene control concerns. The narrower officer account came first. The broader explanation came later. The analyst did not label that sequence improper. He placed the save events on the worksheet and continued. Dana looked at the lines. Dispatch update, EMS handoff, location compliance, detention, initial classification, Barlow supplement, Danner supplemental, supervisory review. The documents had been read separately for days. In one column, their order became harder to flatten into a single event. The analyst opened Danner's original report again and searched for the action that had created the interference classification. Several phrases described the scene generally. Dana had inserted herself into an active police matter. Her conduct required additional scene control. Her continued presence complicated officer activity. The worksheet listed observable acts, not conclusions. The analyst began a second column. Physical contact with controlled property. None shown. Failure to remain at directed location. None shown after instruction. Attempt to remove detained person. None documented. Medical information provided? Yes. Updated suspect description before Dana detention? Yes. He stopped typing. The screen remained on that column for several seconds. Dana did not fill the space for him. The analyst went back to the report history. He opened Hensley's supervisory record from the previous review. Its materials list showed that Hensley had already examined the Bodycam, both supplemental statements and the dispatch update, before he selected classification unchanged. That decision now had a different place in the chronology. It no longer sat before the contradictory material. It sat after it. The analyst printed the worksheet. The printer beside the wall pulled the pages through slowly, one at a time. He placed them face down. He checked the page count and attached the pages to the professional standards file. Dana was not asked to sign the chronology. They asked only whether the recorded sequence matched what she remembered. She read it from top to bottom. Yes. The analyst marked her response as confirmation of sequence, not agreement with any legal or disciplinary conclusion. Her hospital status was outside his authority. Harbor Ridge had sent notice. Her clinical restriction remained in place while the police classification stayed active. Professional standards could review the police record, but it could not restore her trauma assignments. The cost kept accumulating while the documents were being sorted. Before Dana left, the analyst opened a standard request form. The recipient field contained Danner's name. Below, it was a space labeled Specific Factual Basis. The analyst attached the chronology worksheet and selected the original interference classification as the item requiring clarification. He did not ask Danner why he had made the decision. He asked what observable act supported it after the dispatch update and before Dana's detention. Then he sent the request. The professional standards analyst placed Paul Danner's response beside the chronology packet and left the first page uncovered. Dana Whitaker could read the checked box from her side of the table. See attached statement. The form itself had asked one narrow question. Identify the observable conduct that supported the interference classification after the updated dispatch information and before Dana's detention. Danner had attached almost 2 pages. His response did not dispute that Jamal Rhodes had experienced respiratory distress. It did not dispute that EMS had assumed care. It no longer suggested Dana had taken anything from police-controlled property. Instead, Danner described the roadside stop as an active scene that required controlled movement and clear officer roles. He said continued attention to officer safety was needed while the identification issue was being resolved. The wording was different. The analyst read the statement once, then moved it beside the records already preserved in the file. Paige Nolan sat at the end of the table with the hospital records packet she had been asked to authenticate. Dana remained opposite the analyst, with her employee badge clipped to the same non-clinical jacket she had been wearing all week. No one asked her to explain the street encounter again. The analyst opened a comparison sheet containing 4 time sources. The first came from dispatch. The revised suspect description had been transmitted before Danner classified Dana's conduct as obstruction-related interference. The update described clothing and a vehicle that did not match Jamal. The second source came from the EMS record. Automated medical telemetry showed Jamal's oxygen level had been falling before Dana identified the inhaler. The later readings improved after treatment began. Those measurements did not depend on Dana's report. The third time came from the detention record tied to Danner's own incident entry. Dana had been told she was not free to leave after the dispatch revision and after EMS had assumed responsibility for Jamal. The fourth time came from the report system. Danner approved the incident classification later. That came after the officers had access to the dispatch update and after the medical event had already been documented. The analyst did not call any one of those records decisive. He aligned them. Dispatch revision, medical confirmation, Dana's detention, report approval. The order stayed the same, regardless of which system he opened first. Danner's new statement said scene control remained necessary even after the medical concern became clear. The analyst highlighted that sentence, then compared it with the earlier supplemental language about Dana escalating scene control concerns. The phrase medical concern had changed position in the explanation. Earlier records had treated Dana's intervention as part of the problem. Danner's new response accepted the medical emergency as real and argued that the classification could still stand because controlling the scene was a separate operational need. Dana watched the analyst move the earlier report to the left and the new response to the right. Nothing dramatic happened between the pages. The wording simply stopped matching in the same way. Page opened the hospital packet long enough to confirm the timestamp on the EMS telemetry export. She did not discuss the later chart access issue. Professional standards had placed that record in a supporting section because it was not the decision under review. The same was true of the hospital security file and later camera status records. They could establish timing and preservation. They did not create a second case. The analyst returned to Danner's response. Did he identify a specific act after EMS took over? Page asked. The analyst looked at the original request. Then he looked at the attachment. He identified continued presence and scene control concerns. Dana remained still. The Bodycam record had already established where that continued presence occurred. Danner had directed her to remain behind the patrol unit, and she had stayed there. The analyst opened the relevant worksheet field. Failure to comply with location instruction. The answer remained no. He moved to the next field. Physical interference after EMS assumption of care. No act had been entered. The next field covered removal, concealment, or handling of police-controlled property after the medical handoff. That remained blank as well. Danner's written response had added more explanation without adding a new observable action by Dana. The analyst attached it to the file anyway. That mattered. Professional standards was not evaluating whether the statement sounded reasonable by itself. The office was preserving what Danner said. He had made that statement after he knew the earlier records were assembled. Dana's phone vibrated once inside her bag. She did not reach for it until the analyst finished marking the records. The message came from Harbor Ridge Scheduling. Her next trauma shift had been converted to clinical education support. The hours were still hers, but the direct care assignment had gone to another nurse. She read the notice and locked the screen. The police review had not reached a finding. Her work restriction did not wait for one. Across the table, the analyst added Danner's response date to the case index. He then entered a note that the response introduced no additional post-handoff conduct beyond what was already documented. He stopped there. No accusation appeared in the note. No motive appeared. The file only recorded what the response supplied and what it did not. Before closing the meeting, the analyst opened Eric Barlow's signed supplement again. Barlow had described Dana stepping back once EMS took responsibility for Jamal. His account also recorded the revised suspect description and did not describe any later physical interference. Professional standards had not yet asked Barlow whether he agreed with Danner's new scene control explanation. That request would come next. Dana stood when the analyst gathered the packet. Page slid the telemetry certification back into her folder and left the room first. The analyst remained at his laptop. On the comparison sheet, 4 times were now locked from 4 different systems. Below them was the field Danner had been asked to fill. Specific obstructive act after EMS assumption of care. The line remained empty. Eric Barlow held the acknowledgement form above the table for several seconds before lowering it beside his notebook. Dana Whitaker sat across from him in the professional standards conference room. Miles Corbin had already connected an evidence laptop to the wall monitor, while the analyst, who had assembled the chronology, kept Danner's written response open in a separate window. The acknowledgement did not ask Barlow whether Dana had been present at the scene. His signed supplement already established that. It asked whether his observations independently supported Danner's description of continued scene control interference after EMS took responsibility for Jamal Rhodes. Barlow read the sentence again. Then he set the pen down. I can confirm what I observed. I can't confirm that wording. The analyst pulled the form back without asking him to change his answer. Barlow did not offer a speech about what should have happened on the street. His earlier supplement already showed that he had followed Danner's directions. It showed he kept Dana where she had been told to remain and did not tell her she was free to leave. Professional standards was not asking him to rewrite that history. It was asking whether his observations supported the explanation Danner had supplied later. They did not. Miles turned the evidence laptop toward the analyst and opened the preservation index for Barlow's cruiser. The in-car video system had retained an event window from the original stop, including audio captured by the vehicle microphone while officers moved around the unit. The file had been preserved during the broader camera review. No one had needed it to establish that Dana was present. Its value was different now. Miles opened the archive information first. The event identifier matched Barlow's vehicle assignment. The original capture time matched the dispatch sequence, and the preserved file matched the archive checksum recorded when the system stored it. The analyst noted each item before anyone listened. Dana kept her hands beside the paper cup in front of her. The first relevant section began shortly after dispatch revised the suspect description. The forward camera showed the cruiser hood and part of the sidewalk. Danner and Barlow were outside the center of the frame, but both voices carried through the microphone. Barlow spoke first. "The description doesn't fit him now," Danner answered without raising his voice. "Keep the stop open until we sort it." The analyst stopped playback and marked the audio position. Nothing in those few seconds resolved why Jamal had originally been stopped. That question remained outside the narrow review concerning Dana. The recording established something smaller. Danner had heard the mismatch. The analyst resumed playback. Several minutes later, the ambulance crew had already taken responsibility for Jamal's breathing problem. The vehicle microphone picked up equipment being moved and one of the EMTs closing a compartment. Dana's body cam position, preserved on Barlow's separate recording, showed her where Danner had directed her to stand. She was no longer near the gray property pouch. She was not inside the EMS work area. She was not handling police property. Barlow's voice came through again. "Why are we still holding her?" Danner answered almost immediately. "Her interference is separate." Miles did not stop the file. The recording continued for several more seconds. It captured ordinary movement around the cruiser and the ambulance getting ready to leave. No new instruction to Dana followed. No refusal followed. No physical act appeared that had not already been documented. The analyst backed the file up and played Danner's sentence one more time. Not louder, just once. Dana looked at the timestamp in the corner of the screen. The medical handoff had already occurred. The updated suspect information had already been transmitted. Danner's words did not describe a new act by her. They described a decision to separate the interference classification from the event that had originally produced it. That difference had not been visible when the first incident report was read by itself. It was visible now because the later written response, Barlow's supplement, and the fleet audio were sitting in the same file. The analyst opened Danner's recent statement. His language about scene control and officer safety no longer appeared as a general explanation written in isolation. The audio showed that the separation had begun at the scene itself, after the medical condition and suspect mismatch were already known. Barlow watched the screen. The analyst asked him one question. "When Sergeant Danner said her interference was separate, did you observe a new act by Ms. Whitaker after EMS took over?" Barlow kept both hands on the table. "No." The answer was entered without expansion. Barlow did not become the person who had stopped the detention. He had remained part of it. His value to the review came from something narrower. When asked to support a description that went beyond his recorded observations, he did not add facts that were not there. Miles opened the archived body camera file next. Professional standards had already confirmed in the earlier review that the upload had completed successfully. This time, Miles compared the archive checksum with the preservation record and played only the interval surrounding the medical handoff. The picture added location to what the vehicle microphone had captured. Dana stepped back when EMS assumed care. She remained behind the patrol unit. Her hands stayed away from the property pouch. Danner spoke with Barlow several feet away. The camera did not supply a dramatic missing scene. It supplied the same sequence from another system. The analyst placed the Bodycam authentication record beside the fleet audio authentication record. Then he attached Barlow's unsigned acknowledgement form and his short interview response. Danner's original classification remained in the file. His later scene control explanation remained in the file. Nothing was deleted. That was the point of the preservation package. The system could now show the original decision and the later explanation. It also showed the subordinate officer's refusal to expand his observations and the recordings that fixed each event to a time and place. Dana did not ask when the classification would be removed. That decision belonged to the next stage. Miles finished the export. verified the file count, and handed control of the evidence set back to the professional standards analyst. The analyst selected the preservation option for formal review. A warning box appeared on the monitor, explaining that the source package could no longer be edited without generating a new audit entry. He confirmed it. The edit icons disappeared. Dana Whitaker's chair was placed along the side of the review table, not at either end. Sergeant Paul Danner sat several seats away, with a thin department folder in front of him. Lena Ortiz, the outside reviewer, assigned to the formal evidentiary review, occupied the center position and controlled the electronic case file from a laptop connected to the wall display. Nobody in the room worked for Dana. Nobody there reported to Danner. That changed how the meeting would run before anyone spoke. Ortiz began with the incident classification that had followed Dana from the street to the police report and then into Harbor Ridge's administrative review. Civilian interference during active detention. She left the wording on the screen and opened Eric Barlow's original field note beside it. Barlow's note used different language. Female nurse providing medical assistance. The two phrases described the same person during the same event. Ortiz did not ask which version sounded better. She asked what source supported the difference. Gordon Ellis authenticated the hospital telemetry export without repeating the medical history. The automated readings showed Jamal Rhodes's respiratory decline, beginning before Dana directed anyone toward the inhaler, followed by improvement after treatment started. The numbers established sequence. They did not establish obstruction. Paige Nolan then identified the hospital security image already preserved during the custody review. The partial camera angle showed the gray property pouch inside the police-controlled area before Dana arrived. Jamal's phone was visible through the open top. That image had originally mattered because later records raised a question about access to Jamal's chart. Its meaning was narrower here. Dana could not have used the phone to obtain anything before or during the medical intervention. The phone had already been under police control. Ortiz marked that source as supporting chronology and moved on. Miles Corbin authenticated the dispatch entry, carrying the revised suspect information. The record had been received while Danner was still supervising the roadside scene. Barlow had acknowledged that update at the time. The review packet did not require anyone to reconstruct the radio traffic again. The entry already showed when the information arrived and which unit received it. Ortiz placed the dispatch record beside Danner's original narrative. The narrative described Dana entering an active detention and disrupting scene control. It did not identify a separate obstructive action after the revised description arrived. Ortiz then moved the EMS handoff record into the same column. Again, no post-handoff action appeared. Danner kept one hand on the edge of his folder. Ortiz asked him to identify the conduct supporting continued classification after EMS took over. He no longer argued that Dana's medical assessment had been unnecessary. She continued challenging the detention process, he said. She also did not fully explain the military marking on the jacket when I was trying to establish who she was. Dana looked at the olive jacket folded beside her bag. The Harbor 7 patch was not evidence of police authority. It had never been presented as one. Ortiz opened Barlow's contemporaneous supplement. According to that record, Dana had identified the patch as an Old Navy medical unit call sign. She had stated that she was not claiming current military status. Barlow was seated near the far end of the table. Ortiz asked only whether Dana had claimed the jacket gave her authority over the officers. No. Danner turned one page in his folder. She was still questioning what we were doing. Ortiz looked back at the classification. After EMS assumed care, what instruction did she refuse? Danner said Dana had continued asking why she was being held. Ortiz entered the answer into the review worksheet, then returned to the source matrix. Asking why she was still being held came after Danner had already kept her at the scene. The question did not explain the decision that came before it. Dana had listened through most of the review without correcting anyone. Ortiz reached the column labeled Post-Handoff Conduct. Dana leaned forward slightly. Which source places an obstructive act in that column? Ortiz looked across the entries. She did not answer from memory. She checked them. The EMS record established medical transfer. The dispatch entry established revised suspect information. Barlow's field note recorded medical assistance, and Dana stepping back. The custody image placed the phone under police control. The authenticated camera record fixed Dana's location after the handoff. Danner's narrative supplied the word interference. His later response supplied scene control. Neither identified a separate physical act after EMS assumed care. Ortiz left the question in the worksheet. The review continued to the supervisory record. A prior supervisory review had preserved Danner's classification after contradictory material was already available. Ortiz did not open a second misconduct inquiry around that decision. She used the record for one purpose. It established that the original narrative had remained operative after the system possessed information that could have prompted reassessment. The distinction mattered because Dana's hospital restriction had followed the operative classification, not the raw street observations. By the time Harbor Ridge received the police inquiry, Dana was no longer being described simply as the nurse who had pointed out an inhaler. She was attached to an interference record. That record had traveled farther than the event itself. Ortiz closed the hospital packet and returned to the police sources. Danner was allowed to add anything he believed the matrix omitted. He added nothing new about Dana's conduct after the medical handoff. Instead, he said officers in active scenes had to retain discretion when civilians inserted themselves into uncertain situations. Ortiz entered the statement without argument. Then she marked the factual issue for disposition by the review authority. Danner's role in that decision ended there. He could submit a correction to the source matrix if a document had been quoted inaccurately. He could not approve the finding, change the evidentiary standard, or remove a preserved source from consideration. Dana watched Ortiz save the completed matrix into the formal review file. The original incident narrative remained in the packet. So did Danner's later explanation. Neither was deleted. Ortiz placed the independent chronology beside them and locked the exhibit list for disposition review. The first report was still there. It was no longer the record everything else had to fit around. The first line Dana read was not an apology. It was a status entry. Disposition. Withdrawn. The obstruction referral connected to a roadside detention had been removed from active review. The incident record now carried a linked administrative finding that could not be separated from the original narrative in later searches. Dana read the paragraph beneath it twice, because the wording was narrower than anything Danner had used. The review found that after emergency medical personnel confirmed respiratory distress and updated dispatch information materially weakened the original identification concern, Dana Whitaker remained classified as obstructive. No separately documented obstructive act occurred after those events. The finding did not discuss Danner's intent. It did not describe Dana as heroic. It did not use her Navy service to justify the correction. It stayed with sequence, conduct, and documentation. Lena Ortiz had signed the disposition electronically, but the authority line beneath her name showed that the decision belonged to the independent review process, not to Danner's chain of command. That distinction changed what happened next. The original incident narrative remained in the police system because the department did not erase submitted reports after review. A correction notice was attached to it instead, and the administrative finding appeared whenever the original interference classification was opened. Danner's wording stayed visible. So did the record explaining why it no longer controlled the disposition. Dana received the notice at Harbor Ridge while sitting at a workstation outside Melissa Hargrove's office. The same computer had shown her reduced assignment access after the hospital placed her under administrative review. Melissa stood beside the printer while the police disposition came through the hospital compliance mailbox. Gordon Ellis opened the hospital case file from his own terminal and entered the police finding as an external record correction. He had already completed the deeper access audit, so there was no new investigation to perform. The cached session activity had not originated from Dana's active workstation session. The police timeline no longer supported the assumption that she had used Jamal's phone or roadside access to obtain medical information. Gordon changed the hospital allegation from pending employee access review to closed. It was unsupported by available access records. The status change took less than a minute. The employment consequences took longer. Harbor Ridge's scheduling system did not automatically restore Dana's charge permissions. Gordon had closed the compliance case. Melissa had to submit a separate role restoration request. The restriction had been entered through nursing administration, not information security. Dana watched Melissa select the correct job code, attach the closure notice, and send the request into the staffing queue. People rarely remembered that particular delay when they later summarized the incident. The allegation could disappear from active review in one screen, while the person affected by it still could not perform the job she had been doing before it existed. "When does the restriction end?" Dana asked. Melissa checked the confirmation message. As soon as staffing posts the restoration, Dana nodded and wrote down the submission time on the corner of her printed notice. She did not ask for an estimate. The police department issued its own administrative changes that afternoon. The disposition summary sent to the involved parties stated that Danner had been removed from field supervisory assignment, while the personnel review continued. His authority to approve evidence access restrictions was also suspended. He could no longer place or maintain a technical restriction on records connected to incidents he had supervised. The personnel process did not end that day. Weeks later, the final administrative notice confirmed that Danner would remain with the department, but would no longer serve in a supervisory field role. The notice cited deficiencies in documentation and supervisory decision-making tied to the same incident review. There was no arrest. There was no immediate termination. His badge remained active. His supervisory authority did not. Barlow's record was handled differently. The department preserved his initial participation in Jamal's detention, including the fact that he had followed Danner's scene direction before questioning the continued classification. His refusal to sign the broader supplemental wording also remained part of the review file. No commendation was issued. No disciplinary finding was entered against him from the later documentation dispute. The record kept both parts. Jamal's status required a separate correction because his clinical placement had been affected by the unresolved police disposition. Harbor Ridge's education office received the corrected incident status. It reinstated his EMT field placement eligibility without requiring him to repeat the earlier review process. Dana saw that update only because Gordon added it to the shared compliance closure file. The entry was 2 sentences long. Jamal was eligible again. The weeks already lost from the rotation schedule were not returned. The city's risk office handled Dana's documented losses through a limited administrative claim rather than a large civil settlement. Payroll records confirmed the shifts affected by her temporary reassignment. The claim included those losses, along with a defined amount for legal consultation connected to the obstruction referral. The payment letter did not describe pain or dignity. It listed dates, categories, and approved amounts. Dana signed the acknowledgement because the figures matched the records she had submitted. The correction also changed procedure beyond her file. The new language stayed close to the defect the review had identified. For incidents involving civilian medical intervention, any continued enforcement action after medical personnel assumed care now required the report to identify the specific obstructive conduct that occurred after the handoff. General references to scene control were not enough by themselves. Supervisory edits to incident narratives also had to preserve the prior version rather than replace it, leaving a visible history of how descriptions changed. A separate evidence rule required restrictions approved by a supervisor who was directly involved in the underlying incident to route through independent evidence review. None of the changes mentioned Dana by name. They did not need to. The procedural language tracked the same points the source matrix had exposed. Near the end of the day, Melissa returned to the workstation, where Dana was finishing a medication audit form for another unit. The staffing portal refreshed. Dana's employee profile no longer showed the temporary restriction beneath her title. A new message appeared in her hospital inbox. It confirmed restoration of charge responsibilities effective with her next scheduled shift. Dana opened the message and checked the effective date against the staffing calendar. Then she printed one copy for her records. The same workstation that had shown her name removed from the charge assignment now showed it available again. She folded the page once and placed it inside her work bag. The charge chair was empty when Dana Whitaker came through the trauma unit doors with her work bag over one shoulder. The old olive field jacket was folded over her arm. The assignment board was mounted beside the staffing desk. Her name was back on it, Dana Whitaker, charge nurse. No temporary restriction appeared beneath the line. No second nurse had been assigned to approve her decisions. The staffing column showed the same level of access she had held before the police inquiry reached Harbor Ridge. Dana stopped long enough to read the board once. Then she put her work bag beneath the counter. The printed reinstatement email remained folded inside. Melissa Hargrove was already working through the morning staffing list. She moved one name from the observation unit to trauma, checked the bed count, and handed Dana the charge clipboard without making a separate announcement. 2 call-outs, Melissa said. Bay 3 is waiting on transport. Dana took the clipboard. Got it. That was the handoff. Across the unit, a nurse pushed a supply cart toward the clean room. Someone at the medication station replaced a printer roll. The overnight charge nurse finished a note at the computer and logged out. No one stopped working. Dana opened the clipboard and checked the first page. Bed assignments, pending transfers, staff coverage. The same categories that had been there before her name disappeared from the board. Gordon Ellis came through the unit several minutes later with his laptop under one arm. He did not bring another interview form. He stopped at the workstation near Melissa and opened Dana's compliance case. The status showed closed. Gordon verified that the nursing access restriction was gone, entered the final closure date, and saved the file. Dana could see the screen from the charge station. Her name remained in the case history because the hospital did not erase completed reviews. The final status remained beside it, unsupported by available access records. Closed. Gordon turned the laptop toward Melissa for the final administrative check. Melissa read the line and nodded. That was all the hospital required. The review no longer controlled Dana's schedule. The original police record followed the same basic structure. Dana's closure packet remained in her work bag beside the reinstatement notice. The obstruction narrative had not been deleted, but the independent finding now stayed linked to it, and the referral had been withdrawn. The finding had identified the point the later explanations never fixed. Emergency personnel had confirmed respiratory distress. The updated dispatch information had weakened the original reason for holding Jamal. Dana had followed directions after EMS assumed care. No separate obstructive act had been documented after that handoff. The preserved timestamps, medical telemetry, dispatch history, and authenticated recordings had established the order. Danner's later description could remain in the archive. It no longer controlled the outcome. His personnel result had also taken effect. The final notice Dana received through the review process stated that he would remain with the department. It also said he would not return to field supervision. His authority to approve evidence restrictions on incidents he supervised was gone. Dana had read the notice once. There was nothing else she needed from it. Her payroll correction had covered the documented shifts affected by the temporary reassignment. The administrative claim had covered the approved legal expense. Neither entry changed the staffing calendars from those weeks. The shifts had already been worked by other people. Dana had already spent those days away from the charge desk. The money could be corrected. The dates could not. Near the end of the morning, Jamal Rhodes came through the unit doors. He wore the navy polo Harbor Ridge uses for EMT clinical placements. An identification card hung on a plain plastic clip at his collar. His placement schedule had restarted. The end date was later now, because the missed rotation time still had to be completed. He stopped at the charge station. Dana looked at the clinical assignment sheet. Bay 4 until lunch, she said. Start with the equipment check. Jamal looked at the sheet. Bay 4. Dana handed it to him. He walked toward the supply alcove and began checking the trauma card against the printed inventory list. There was no conversation about the parking lot. No one asked him to describe the stop again. His name was on the clinical schedule. That was the status that mattered inside the hospital. Dana moved through the next several hours the same way she had before the review began. She reassigned a lunch break when an ambulance arrival ran long. She called environmental services for a room that had not cleared. She checked a medication question with pharmacy. She moved one patient from a hallway position after a bed opened upstairs. The work did not pause to notice she was back. At the charge station, the olive jacket rested over the back of the chair. The Harbor 7 patch was still sewn above the pocket. Its thread was worn at one corner. No one asked what the words meant. No one asked about Dana's Navy service. No one used the patch to explain why she had known what respiratory distress looked like. The medical record had already answered that question without it. The jacket had never given her authority over the police scene. It had never needed to. By mid-afternoon, Jamal returned the equipment sheet with 2 empty boxes marked for replacement. Dana checked the list, initialed the supply request, and handed it back. Take it to Central Supply. The exchange lasted less than 10 seconds. Melissa came by the charge station before leaving for another meeting. She checked the assignment board, looked at the coverage column, and removed an outdated staffing note from the lower corner. Dana's name stayed where it was. The old printed reinstatement email remained inside her bag. She no longer needed it to explain why she was sitting in the chair. The board already showed that. The computer access already showed that. The staff assignments already moved through her again. A trauma pager sounded at the edge of the desk. Dana picked it up and read the incoming notice. A new patient was 3 minutes out. She set the pager beside the clipboard, stood, and checked the open bay. The olive jacket slipped slightly from the chair when she moved. Dana caught it by the collar. She carried the clipboard back toward the charge station as the ambulance entrance opened at the other end of the unit. Dana hung the old jacket over the back of the charge chair and turned to the next patient. This story is fictional.